Did you meet your goal of 7 articles in
Nope,
the first?
I did not.
Ah,
I wrote three,
you
and
wrote three and banked out,
yeah.
huh? But you've been
Well,
writing for a while, though.
I have been, and I have it, work wise. It was a particularly busy week, um, so I just was working late into the evenings and uh, almost every day. So actually, yeah, I hit Saturday. I usually work on Saturday, and I was so exhausted by the week that I only worked a few hours in the morning, and then I didn't even keep going. So that's how. So I guess in that sense, it was a pretty crazy week.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's pretty normal. You're so used to it. But if I asked you like, hey, did you do your writing stuff? No, it was too busy. It was too crazy for that. That's
it
good.
was, it was too, it was too, it was too busy, and I did write things for work, quite a few things for work. So it's not that I didn't write.
But you had
I
went on
guess
a
if you count emails, I did way more than uh
emails don't count.
no. Yeah, you're
They
right.
don't count at all. So have you had a chance to glance at any of my writing?
No,
No.
I haven't.
Doggone it.
No.
I was hoping that you'd be able to go ahead and give me some pointers and critique stuff, but okay.
I'm of no use. I'm of no use to you.
Okay, so here's my second question. Or third question now. Did you watch the fight?
I
Now you know
did.
there were two. There was two. There was two fights. You had the John
The
Jones fight that happened Saturday.
the US, yeah, I watched both of them.
Okay, I
So
missed that one. But the fight that everybody was talking about, the John Jones fight got upstaged by was
was
the
the Tyson
Paul, yeah,
Logan
Tyson,
Paul.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just
It was exactly what I expected. So all of the people that were disappointed, I thought, what that pretty much went exactly as I expected. I was
well
just hoping Mike Tyson wouldn't get
knocked
injured or
clean, yeah,
knocked
yeah.
out or something, right? Just at his age. But I think, for a guy his age, he did a good job. I think Logan Paul did a good job of respectfully fighting a man more than twice his age. Um,
I
I
think so
think that,
too.
so. Um, the was it the welterweight? I didn't watch the fight with the girls. It makes me sick to my stomach. I can't do that. But the
I was at somebody else's house. I couldn't change the channel. I was like, I started watching my phone. I
yeah.
couldn't watch that. Yeah.
But the welterweight fight, was that welterweight? The one that was before that, it was a good.
I don't know. I didn't catch any of those.
A good fight. So yeah, I mean, it was what I expected. It was a spectacle. It was enjoyable. I love boxing just as a martial art. It's a great.
But that wasn't
art.
boxing. Just to be fair.
The big fight at the end wasn't, but the earlier.
Oh, you watched
fight
some of those? Yeah, I didn't watch any.
Yeah. And then it was a great UFC event too. You had some really good Brazilian snake style jiu-jitsu, which is not super exciting in terms of the energy, but just the wrestling matches were good. And then that John Jones fight was great. It was really, two good fighters. Same one is kind of getting older. He's reaching retirement, but he's the most decorated of all time. And then John Jones, such a creative fighter. He did a really good job. And
his fights are like art.
Yeah.
His fights are like art. It was beautiful the way he played chess in that. And I didn't see the fight in time. I saw it post.
Yeah.
But watching it was like, wow, some of the setups and the things he did was like, that's just brilliant.
And then, when he won, he, thanked Jesus, and then took the belt over to Trump, and the place went wild. We live in a very different world. All the NFL guys too doing the Trump dance this weekend. It was just, it's just so different than it was, I don't know, 3-4 months ago. It's wild how that can happen and shift and change. And I think some of it is just the defeat of the media's narrative seems to have freed a lot of people from anxiety. Did you see the Charlemagne the God interview?
Which one?
The one where he was just explaining, the comment that he made was something like, well, if this guy really is Hitler incarnate, why are they now advocating a peaceful transition of power? Why is this, like it's no big deal? He said, were they not telling me the truth? And I think, okay,
he's not that dumb. He's not that stupid.
He's not that stupid. I don't think. Is he trying to reposition himself in the new world that he can see, like, the world's new and different, I've got to reposition myself. I can't be the guy that only serves this minority within the minority of the population, politically, or what, I don't know what's going on there. If he just is,
I think the disappointment with Charlemagne is, you guys told me a lie. I knew it was a lie. I believed it. Why didn't you act on it?
Right.
I think it's like, no,
why didn't you follow through?
Yes, because I thought we were, the thing that they were in on wasn't necessarily the lie. It's what the lie leads to, right? It was, since we believe he is Hitler, we're going to do all that we can to make sure Hitler doesn't get in here, right? Is that, everybody agrees to that? Yes. We're not just going to have a rhetorical argument. We're going to do everything possible to make sure Hitler doesn't get in here. And since we've all
this was our opportunity for a revolution.
Yes. And you guys didn't march with us on the revolution. Why are you guys leaving us? I think there's more of that kind of like, wait, you told me he was Hitler. I knew better, but I didn't say nothing. I believed you. I acted like that. I was in because I thought the revolution was going to start. And when it didn't happen, there's a mass level of disappointment. It's amazing watching some liberals are having this weird split right now where some of them refuse to see exactly what happened and are beating a certain drum that really is like, I can't believe America is this messed up. It's switched now. It's switched from, and it started switching towards the end of the election. It switched from Trump is Hitler to these people are all Nazis.
Yeah.
Right. And these people are, America is more messed up than I thought. America is more broken than I thought. And now it switched from Trump to these people. And then the other side of the liberal parties moved to, what do these people know that I don't know? Obviously, I have not understood this branch of America. What am I missing out on? They're not agreeing with it, but they're at least saying we need to investigate what the large majority of Americans find what's wrong with us and what's right with him. Because if we think he's this messed up, how messed up do they think we are?
Right.
Yeah. Thumbs up on that one. Like, there is a real soul searching that's going on. I watch AOC say, hey, listen, conservative friends out there, what podcast are you guys listening to? Where's the shows? What's your favorite ones? I'm truly interested, asking honestly. Watching some folks show up on MSNBC and say, I watched CNN do this towards the end of the election last year. They hired in and brought in some conservative talking guys, had a round table and really let them talk. And I said, oh my goodness, CNN is pivoting.
Right. Yeah.
CNN is not trying to be super left woke no more. I mean, they still are.
They still are. But what I wonder is, for them, is it a money thing, right? Where they're looking at it saying, okay, the population is different. If we're going to stay relevant, we've got to actually serve the real population. Or is it an influence thing where they say, okay, we've got to back up a few steps. I thought we had more influence. I thought we had more control over the narrative. We've got to back up a few more steps and rebuild our control over the narrative. Or do they just realize the world has moved away from television, and so we're no longer it, and so we've got to find our way back?
I think it's that third one because CNN has had the kind of failures most people haven't. In order to understand that clearly, they started that live streaming, they started the app, and that failed and collapsed massively in front of them. Remember they tried to do that CNN Plus thing, and it
Oh,
just
that's right. I forgot
they
about that.
spent millions of dollars on that, and they've had it collapse. Fox is trying to do their streaming thing. Um, because of where they're at, they've played a good game where they haven't had the everything collapse in on them yet. More of the older, mature people with money still are there, but it won't be that way in the next 15 years. But CNN has had to hit rock bottom in a way other people haven't. And so I think that's why I think it's the third one. They realize like there's no way forward if we don't start hitting towards the middle and having them watch us. Right. And watching them do that. And they knew they were going to do that when they fired Don Lemon or they took him off his show and put him onto a 3-person talk. Don Lemon couldn't handle being with somebody who just disagreed with him just a little bit. Right.
Right.
And it was just like, whoa. And he looked radical, super radical, and they had to get rid of him. And then I'm watching all the people who are leaving X. Have you seen some of these? Like all these famous people are leaving X. Like I'm getting off of X now, and it's not. I'm thinking to myself, y'all, this must be what evangelicals sound like who talk about we're leaving something, right? We must sound like this, like whatever it is.
This was them, the evangelicals from the 60s to 80s that said, we've got to retreat because it's not safe out here. That retreat movement where they went from if not the dominant force in America to a backwater, maybe.
Well, I even think it's kind of like I'm thinking about all the Christians canceling stuff and who have left. Like, okay, we're canceling Netflix, we're canceling this, we're canceling that. I'm like, because if you're leaving X, just talk about X for a minute. You decide to leave X. You're like, Elon Musk is a problem. He's got too much power, and X is a horrible platform that does not speak my worldview. Now, you actually have a voice on X, so you couldn't necessarily speak your worldview. It's not like it's closed off. Nobody's stopping you from being super liberal on X. Nonetheless, they are leaving the platform because it helps promote Elon. And then they turn off and delete the app from their cell phone and use that same cell phone to click in to start their Teslas that they jump into and ride that they love so much. And I'm like, they're not leaving their Teslas.
Right.
Which actually they got less control.
And I do wonder, if X is the public square right now and they retreat from it, what do we end up with? Because I think it's, Trump is making appointments or, planning on making appointments to his cabinet in a very populist way. He seems to have understood that we're a coalition of people that oppose something where we don't, there's not a purity test that he's putting people through. It's a coalition test. Are you really a part of the coalition? Yeah, you are. Okay, I'm going to, we don't agree on everything, but we're going to continue functioning as a coalition in the government, right? He's doing those sorts of things. And the people that say, I'm going to retreat from the conversation, they don't realize there's actually a spot for in this moment. There's spots in this coalition, culturally speaking. People are hearing, people are listening. John Jones is thanking Jesus at the UFC and everybody cheers, right? You don't have, this isn't the moment. This isn't 2020 when you're getting yourself canceled from things, but the people that are uncomfortable on a platform where the people that disagree with them don't get kicked off, they're just realizing, well, I don't feel safe here because there are ideas that I don't like. That's unfortunately that has been a Christian mentality. Often is it's
Yes.
a and you know when I was first becoming a Christian, one of the things that surprised me was how many Christians had read more on atheism than I had as an atheist. Right? They weren't afraid of ideas because they really believed theirs, and they truly believed that there would be an answer to any question. So new questions didn't frighten them. And but that hasn't been evangelicalism's way of doing things. Right? I remember getting to read the founding documents of a Evangelical Ministers Alliance that had formed down in California, and the founding documents were about how the plan was we're going to get together so we can protest things, so that we can successfully get enough people to quit using products that go against what we like, so that the products will change. We can successfully get people to not go to R-rated movies anymore, so they stop making R-rated movies. This was early 80s, 1981, and thinking, oh man, no wonder we have no say in the culture. We've fled.
I don't know if I should talk about this. So here we go. I've been really thinking about this. So the thing that's got me started thinking about this is Jerry Boyer. We had him on the show talking about Christians, and should I say really conservatives, people who have conservative values, traditional home values, free market values. They actually own a lot of stock in some of these large woke companies. But what ends up happening is they do more complaining about the public narrative of a company and how they feel about it, rather than actually taking their shareholder responsibilities seriously and going to speak to these companies and say, I'm a shareholder here, you work for me. Is that, but the problem, he didn't say this, but it seems like that we have a problem of articulating what we've agreed to, or what the most important thing is. And I'm going to try and explain this the way that he talks about it, and then I'm going to try and explain the way that I understood it, which is you have a part of this company, the goal for them is to make you money, and they're out here talking woke stuff. And instead of going in and talking about the foundation of what made you become a shareholder, you go in, or people complain about it all over social media. And if they were to go in and talk to the owners of these companies, they would just say, I don't like the fact that you guys are out here making trans stuff for little boys to tuck, their wee wee in between and they put it up in Target and all this stuff like this. Like, what's wrong with y'all? And I guess it was JP, I might be wrong on some of the details. He had David Bonson, for some of his clients, I believe, had shares in JP Morgan, and he was able to go to talk to JP Morgan about some of the things that they were doing that wasn't good for the shareholders. And because of the way that he spoke, he was able to actually have JP Morgan consider what they were doing and to make changes not to go down that route. And the way that I understood it was, you have a job. Your job is to produce money for us and to go down and make decisions that actually are in the best interest of the shareholders in that process. So if you get an offer to sell, we make this much amount of profit, you need to do that because it's the best option for the shareholders. If you don't do that, you're breaching our contract of what we agreed to. And so there is this objectivity of our agreement that he pulls them by, that just so happens to encompass the reality of what it is you have a problem with. So when you leave this this understanding of what your responsibilities are to work for us in this way, then you get this woke stuff, then you get this trans stuff, then you get this gay stuff, then you get all this other stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, no, we don't want that. But outside of just that reality, none of that stuff really makes any money anyway. And so to
Right.
go down that road destroys the relationship that we agreed to, which was to produce more income for us as the shareholders and the people who have invested in this company. That is your job. The way you need to go about doing that is thus, right? And somehow in this process, it made me think we've lost touch with the general natural law principles of reality, right? So we somehow think that, let me say that differently. We don't pull people by the reality that the law that God has placed inside of people's heart. It really is there. And the free market shares that same reality. Everything shares that reality. When I talk to somebody who is not a Christian, who might be married, because of the fact that they've communicated this covenant reality of marriage to each other, I can pull them by that covenantal reality and require certain things from them, even though they're not Christians. It's like,
Right.
look, man, you can't cheat on your wife just because you're a pagan. You've made covenant, like that's what you told her you wouldn't do. Like you're living it as much as you're trying to escape God's world and the way God's world runs, it's impossible to escape it. And then I can start explaining why it's that way and why repentance is the only option that they have. And then obedience to not just the general revelation of God, but to the specific revelation of God is the only way that you're going to function properly in this world. And we do that with marriage. Like we can understand that concept with marriage, but when it comes to the free market and other things like that, we tend to treat them like they're secular or a room for secularism. So we don't say, let's go over here and make Christian marriage. Like, no, marriage is Christian by default. Just the very nature of it. Just like words are Christian by default. Like that's God's words. The air is God's. So is the free market, right? That's how it's. And so we don't think of the free market. And I'm starting to change this myself as like, no, this is God's. And so you have to do it a particular way and nobody gets to run from it.
You don't have you just because you believe in magic doesn't mean water will start to run uphill.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
exactly. Wow,
and there
you just did
is
that so much better than I did. So pithy.
I think that some of it is that I think we actually are thinking in the same sort of categories.
Yes.
So we think because propaganda, it doesn't ever work long term, but we still fear it, or we think that we need our own propaganda. But it's the and we look at places like England, and you're kind of watching the slow motion fall to communism from a distance.
Yeah.
And I get why we say we've got to do something to stop that. But because of our fear, we often retreat in the face of victory. in the places where we're on the verge of having victory, we retreat because of fear.
What do you mean by that? So explain that with England. So how does that play in England? So they're on the decline.
They're on the decline now, right? But they're reaping what they sowed.
Yes.
A long time ago.
Yes.
And back then, the church said, "Well, we can't win this fight. We've got to join the other side," right? So back,
when would you mark that? Yeah.
Post World War II, right? Because you had a really strong English church in the late 1800s, right? You had the reviving of the English church going on, and you had good stuff going on, and then coming out of World War II, and just as the kind of the modern liberal setup began to grow, the church had an opportunity to resist, but it was afraid to lose its voice because it thought if it continues to speak the way that the church in England has historically spoken, that it was going to lose its voice because there was this, respectability campaign being run mostly in the seminaries and in the universities, this respectability campaign. And they didn't want to lose their respectability, because without their respectability, then we're not going to have a place to have a voice, right? So we've got to keep our respectability.
So you're looking at this era, J. Gresham Machen's era, that whole moment right in there. Is that what you're looking at for time frame?
Time frame. So yeah, in America, that's when we had the fundamentalist movement, which it became kind of what we think of as fundamentalists, the retreatist movement, in the 50s, but 50s into the 60s, but because you still had the church still had a public voice.
Yeah.
It had kind of lost its public institution nature, but in those moments, you really had you still had different sermons being published in the New York Times. You had different preachers, that had they had a public voice because they were considered not necessarily public intellectuals, but kind of a public conscience. And in America, the retreat happened mostly around the shifting eschatology. So as the church shifted into a dispensationalism, the retreat was kind of married to that shift into dispensationalism in America. But it was a retreat from their public voice, because we still had a significant public voice. In England, there was because England doesn't have the separation of church and state that we have. That's not a part of the way that they think, but they were promised a more significant voice if they modernized. And so they did. They modernized, thinking the world is going this direction. We need to go with it if we're going to continue to have a voice. And the fruit of that is now they had no defense. They had no defense against a culture coming in and taking over. And you had one was the culture of modernism, which probably came from Germany, that kind of area, that the modernistic voice, which you had some in England, because you had people arguing for eugenics, you had some people arguing for and unfortunately you had people in the church arguing for eugenics in the early 1900s. World War II comes through, and you really get this opportunity to say, oh wait, that was a bad idea, let's reset. But the church didn't reset to a traditional doctrine. It reset to a modernist version of Christianity in America.
And explain what that modernism and modernistic version is.
Yeah, so it gave up on the cosmology that says God created this place and has particular intentions for it, and said, okay, well, this place came about by evolution. God directed the evolution, maybe, and then religion is an important evolutionary step in the development of mankind. So it's still really important because of the effect that religion has. It helps us be humans, but it isn't because it's true, it's because it's useful, right? So religion becomes a useful thing rather than a fight for truth and beauty and
the foundation of ethics for a nation. Yeah.
Right. The foundation of goodness. So Christianity becomes sort of an arm of the the coercive power of evolution
Mm.
to bring to improve humanity. So you have that people teaching that. So they say, well, whether or not Jesus was historically raised from the dead is not important. It's how that story inspires us that's important, right? So so religion becomes the internal, kind of the cultural internal response. Um, so it's a Gnostic version of Christianity. So it's not important whether or not Jesus raised from the dead. It's important whether or not I believe it, right? Because it's my belief that ends up. So I know Jesus didn't raise from the dead, but I still believe that he did, and that's what's important. You know, you have people saying that sort of thing, right? It's a
that's kind of.
T.S. Eliot.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, T.S. Eliot, he calls it the what does he call it? The disintegration of the psyche of England. So he talks about, we need to fight for the historical reality of Christianity. We need to fight for the Trinity. We need to fight for these doctrines, because the psyche of England is deintegrating right before our eyes. Right? It's peeling apart into two pieces, or into multiple pieces right before our eyes. And T.S. Eliot, in the short run, he lost the argument because the church didn't listen to him and hold the line. But he was looking at it and seeing it happen and saying the Western psyche is fracturing. Right? The Western psyche is fracturing before our eyes because they're separating historical realities from beliefs. Right? So, and that fracturing of the psyche, eventually, there's no way to stop communism.
Do you think that I've been really pondering this idea between
collectivization? I think it's not necessarily communism. You're going to end up with a collectivization,
which leads to communism. Yeah.
Communism is kind of the hip version of collectivization in the present, but there's that collectivization that says, my psyche isn't being held together by reality, and so power has to be applied to hold my psyche together.
That's something has to be the work of the Spirit, right? Do you think that this? I've been thinking through the idea of what a Calvinistic world builds and what an Arminian world builds. And do you think that this is that's what's inherent when you go into the sovereign changing from God to you, right? Like that's inherent inside of an Arminian worldview, is that the sovereign changes, because there's not a question about who's sovereign. The only question is which one of us is going to be the sovereign. Is it going to be God who chooses and makes and establishes the world, or is it going to be me to say that now when I believe something, it is what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a Pelagian worldview rather than Arminian, probably. But
does Arminianism come out of Pelagianism?
Arminianism.
Am I thinking about that right?
Well, I mean, Arminianism was it was an attempt to solve the problem of man's will and God's will fitting together, right? And Arminianism is an attempt to solve the problem. And I mean, obviously, as a Calvinist, I think Calvinism solves it better. But Arminianism says there is a solution to this problem. Pelagianism says it's one or the other, right? That we don't solve the problem. Pelagianism says no, man's will is the primary. And Calvinism and Arminianism are two different attempts at solving the problem, which is why they're both still within orthodoxy.
I don't really agree. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I get it. I'm just saying, because I don't know an Arminian who wouldn't consider himself a Pelagian.
Well, I think this is how
I wouldn't tell them that that's Pelagianism, but when I describe it for them, they know.
This is how you find out, right? So if you say to somebody, if they're like, oh yeah, you're a Calvinist, I'm not a Calvinist, you say, okay, well, what part of your salvation do you have to say thank you for?
And
And
say
what
all of
part
it.
do you not, right?
Yeah.
When they say all of it, you say, okay, well, you're a Calvinist in disguise, right? We're doing the math differently on how you bring God's will and God's glory to bear in our salvation, and you, and I think it's still an important discussion to back up, but you're still dealing within
I agree.
Christianity. I
Yeah.
have asked people that question and they've said, oh, it's probably 50-50. Right now,
Yeah.
you're a Pelagian, right? When somebody says, well, no, there's parts that you do that you don't have to say thank you for.
I think the
Then I
framing of
think
your question gives people an out. I think the framing of your question, it's so nice. It's so nice. I'm so grateful for people like you. You help you. It's like helping somebody. Okay, which one of these is not like the other? That one.
I, I just, I really do think that the way Calvinists and Arminians end up in their own cul-de-sacs
Yeah,
is
no,
is so unhelpful in the long run, that
I agree.
I don't
I
like
agree.
that.
But it does have massive implications. One thing I will say is that most of the people who are Arminian function far more like Calvinists than even Calvinists do. And they hate when I tell them that. And me and my Calvinist friends hate when I say that. But they really do. They really believe um, Calvinism in
Yeah,
practice. And it's so funny to listen to them preach like God's gonna move and work, and it's just amazing. Versus actually how they believe, and I've seen that so many times. So I get what you're doing in that,
yeah,
and so you're not wrong. So I'll bend. Do you think Pelagianism sets up that kind of worldview?
yeah. I mean,
Because
I think the Enlightenment is sort of a Pelagian strike
mm,
back against the victory of Augustine in the West, right? Augustine,
Pelagian strike back.
yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a
hold on, hold
shift.
on. The Enlightenment is a Pelagian. The okay,
Yeah,
Enlightenment strike.
Pelagian. It's Pelagius striking back against Augustine 1,000 years later, um, because Augustine thoroughly won that battle, and the Orthodoxy thoroughly won that battle, the Council of Orange, and you end up with um, a deeply Augustinian culture that is built on the sovereignty of God, and post Enlightenment we tend to take sovereignty to mean power, right? He's the God who doesn't give up power at all, right? But sovereignty meant it means rule, right? So what does the rule and reign of God is, everything else exists within it. So God, it's not a power question, it's an authority question. Is there anything that escapes the authority of God, and is the authority of God active? And Augustine said yes, absolutely. And the authority of man, the will of man, exists within it and isn't destroyed by it because it's of a different nature as a created will. Right? The created will um, actually only can exist within the sovereign will of the Father, but the created will remains a will that we're responsible for, right? That we're responsible for how we employ our will, but our will does not displace the sovereign will of God, who is authoritative over all, and his authority is active by the Spirit, by his um, by his planning. So he plans out everything in advance, and then he implements by the power of the Spirit. And then by the presence of Christ, he's implementing his will during the earthly ministry of Christ. Christ is implementing his sovereign will through the power of the Spirit, and there's nothing that he doesn't have authority over. our will is a real will existing inside the sovereign will of God, and our responsibility is not dislodged by the responsibility of the will of God. That's Augustinianism, right? So if you say, well, whose will is active, God's or man's? You say, oh no, they're both active wills. Right? You don't have so the freedom of the will of man is real. It just is a created will that exists inside the sovereign will of the uncreated will of the
The will
sovereign
within
God.
the will.
Yeah. So because we tend to think of freedom of the will in like it's, you know, how many ping pong balls can you fit in the trunk of a car? If God's will is sovereign and the trunk is full of ping pong balls, in order to fit man's will in, you have to crush some of the ping pong balls to make room. But instead, it's more like, you know, the will of men are the ping pong balls, and the car is the will of God, right? It exists inside of it, and it still remains a real will. We're really actually responsible. We make free choices, and the free choices are free choices within the will, the sovereign will of God. They're dependent upon our created nature. They grow out of our created nature, and that that sovereignty created the that understanding of sovereignty created Christendom. It created the ability to have layered jurisdictions that are all real jurisdictions within one another's jurisdictions, because all of it exists within the sovereign active jurisdiction of God's will, that is planned from all time, right? Providence means that all things are planned out in advance, and then predestination means that the final place of all things is known by God in advance, planned by God in advance. It's all a part of his sovereign and active will. So all of that makes it possible to resist the impulse to tyranny. Right? The impulse to tyranny says we've got to have one power that controls it all, or else it's chaos. But Augustinianism shows that you actually don't. That isn't the case. It's not chaos to have creatures with free will underneath the will of a sovereign.
So would you, I see how you're making it Pelagianism versus Augustinianism, and I'm making it Calvinist versus Arminianism. But so would you say then that Augustinianism is in line with Calvinistic?
Yeah,
in that sense. So that's a tradition.
Yeah, in that sense. So I think what you end up with is a shift into a
Calstinianism.
Well, so Augustinianism, it underlies, you know, Western thought, legal thought, Western. It's what made it possible to have a transformational view of the governments that come into Christendom, right? So the governments, as they come into Christendom, you can transform them rather than having to replace them.
Watch out with that word trans. We don't do that here. So when you say, so then, I had a question. Hold on, it's coming back. You said trans. I was like, whoa, bro, you gotta hit the rewind button. Would you? Oh, I forgot it, Jason. Doggone. Okay, I'll let you keep going. Oh yeah, yes. All of this plays into what we were talking about earlier. These worldviews are not just something that is a religious, because what I'm trying to do, and I've been trying to do this for a long time, and I've been trying to do this since we've been talking for years, is that we've come into this Reformed Christian world with somehow this bifurcation between religious thinking versus world thinking, or in the world thinking. And we think that these two things are separate. We think that we can live somehow where we can have these traditions, these worldviews, and they don't really touch down on earth in any real way. And that's why I'm saying with the free market stuff, it matters if you're going to be a Pelagianist, because it
Yeah.
has implications for how you view how free markets work. It matters if you're going to be an Augustinian, because it has implications. Because we're not asking the question just of how does man get saved and get to know the Lord. We're asking the question, how does man live in relationship to the Lord who has saved him and to the rest of the world? And what is he supposed to do with it? And how does that work its way all the way out in everything? So the question I had, I want to get back to that, but the question I had is, what are the books I need to read from Augustine? Like, give me like
Oh man, that's really a good question. So
that's all I ask, Jason. I only ask good questions.
So the Confessions is very popular. It's really well worth the read. It's an amazing book.
Yeah.
It shifted and became the most popular book post Renaissance. So before the Renaissance, The City of God was his most popular book.
Yeah.
And The City of God is about yeah.
That
So The City of God, it is. One of the things that we're working on at Concordus is a high school reader's guide for The City of God. And so I just went through and broke it down into, here are the books that you should definitely read, because most people aren't going to just pick it up the first time and read through the whole thing. There's tons of details. But if you go through and you start with reading these books, then next time you come back, you'll read the whole thing and you've got more of a context, because it's a lot of book. But it was the most popular because it is him wrestling through. So Augustine's born into an imperial setting, right? An empire. And so you're born and raised with all of the empire's assumptions. When the church sends out missionaries and tribal peoples, Celtic peoples that have clan systems are converted, one of the things that's really interesting is those people see things in the Old Testament that imperial Christians that were invisible to the imperial Christians that had converted them. So Augustine wrestling through the two cities, the city of man and the city of God, the city of the old Adam and the city of the new Adam, I think is a helpful way to think about what he's wrestling with. But his wrestling, when it's handed off to people that had been tribal people, non-imperialist monarchists, and people living in clan structures, they took his conversation, and him and Boethius, who's having a similar philosophical conversation inside an imperial mindset, they took those conversations and they brought out of it a covenant theology that was in the Old Testament, but was sort of invisible to the imperial Christians. So the covenant theology, they said, well, we can actually take this covenant theology that we see throughout the Bible and let it transform a clan system. It's easier to transform a clan system or a non-imperial monarchy than it is into covenant categories, covenant theology, than it is for an empire to become covenant, to transform into a covenant theology, because an empire has a power flow that goes up into a single point. And a monarchy, especially a monarchy with a clan structure, it has a power flow that works the other direction, that spreads and layers, right? So it already is functioning in a layered authority way. And so they see that in the Bible and they say, oh, we're doing that. We can actually transform that layered authority system to become more in line with the scriptures. Now, the imperialism, you have imperialism in the scriptures. So you have Cyrus as a good example
Right.
of a good emperor, and then you have Jesus at the end. In Revelation is presented in imperial metaphors. So we've got an example of how an emperor can serve the Lord as an emperor, so that it's not impossible. But the covenant theology that develops out of the conversion of European Christians living within a covenant system, getting into conversation with Augustine, produces it produces the common law system. You get King Alfred making his own translation of Boethius and fixing the covenant, fixing some of Boethius with covenant theology, right? So his translation his translation is a conversation trying to improve what Boethius got right. That's really helpful. And use it to improve, but then he brings in the covenant theology that he's learning from the Pentateuch, that he's learning from the book of Deuteronomy, and he brings these things into conversation, and you get the beginnings of the development of covenant theology, of European covenant theology. And the reason that they could do that is because they were outside of the imperial system, so they still had room in their categories for some of the covenant theology stuff. So but that doesn't happen without Augustine's the City of God, right? So
doggone, I gotta read City of God.
And then the Confessions is him working through his own conversion and sanctification. So it's good on that front, but I don't think it's the most useful of his books. And then the Enchiridion is really good. It's how to bring imperialists into Christianity, and I think we're going to need that sort of thing more and more, because now people think much more like imperialists in modern America than they do like tribal folks. So his stuff, training, preparing the Enchiridion, preparing people for baptism, what imperialist mindset things need to be converted in their mind on their way towards baptism is, I think, a really helpful book.
So which one was that again?
That's called the Enchiridion.
Man, if my wife's gonna get me, I got my Francis Schaeffer books, and it was 5 or 6 books from him on his life's work or whatever. Yeah. And she texted me, I was out of town. She's like, "Excuse me, sir, what are these books doing here?" And I was like, What books?
You're gonna have to stop accepting my calls.
Yeah, every time she sees the phone, it rings, she's like, "Well, Amazon's about to warm up." If it's Jason, I know is that. So then, what are some of the? Go ahead, I'll let you jump. You were going to say something.
Philip, do you have Philip Schaff's set on the Church Fathers?
No.
Okay. Well,
you told me to get that before.
Yeah, but wait for it to. It goes on sale regularly, and you can find it used and stuff. But I spend a lot of time in there, or have spent a lot of time in there through the years.
Okay. So, Jason, I got so many questions. I don't know where to start. I'm just going to throw them all out here. What are some of the Pelagian assumptions that we currently have now that we don't know about in our current situation? And what are some of, and then I want to move from that to, we have a very rich and wealthy set of assumptions that are sitting on the shelf, I think, with our Augustinian worldview that we're not in engaging with anymore. We've kind of left that out. And there's kind of this weird blurring in the middle of the two. It seems like to me, when you see Trump and the new this new coalition, so first let's start with the Pelagian assumptions you see currently in our society right now.
Yeah. So a big part a big part of Pelagianism um, is that you create your nature by your actions, right? You choose who you become um, at the level of your ontology, right? That you choose your nature um, with your actions. So, and this is something that really begins to show back up in the Renaissance, but it kind of reaches its peak at Nietzsche, as he uh,
We've talked a
he's a
lot about this.
classicist, studying the classics and trying to say, hey, before Christianity came along, we used to know that you chose your nature with your actions, that you create yourself basically with your actions. And you have French philosophers like Albert Camus who end up being really influential in the early 20th century America, really influential in the people trying to create a communist utopia in America. He says he's got a book called Nausea, where kind of the big conclusion is that I've got this existential nausea from the fact that I didn't create myself, right? And so my actions have to recreate me, because I can't be the receiver of my identity. I have to be the creator of my identity. And that is kind of the peak of the Machiavellian is a Machiavellian nihilism, ontological nihilism, that says we don't have a nature that uh, we are created out of, or that creates us. We create our nature, or we control our nature. So our nature or is shaped by force from the externals or from our actions, right? We become we become a particular being by means of some sort of coercive power or the activities of our will, different things. Well, that's Pelagianism. Augustine says that what we do is that we receive and accept our nature and then order our loves according to the ontological nature of reality, and thereby find satisfaction, right? So for Camus, the way out of the nausea of existence was to recreate yourself. For Augustine, the way to escape the nausea of dislodgement from reality was to submit yourself to your creatureliness.
This is so interesting. This is back to some of the most simple, basic things we've been talking about for the beginning. Do you think that this is the kind of world that you have to say thank you for, or the kind of world that you say no thank you for? Right?
Right.
No thank you. I will not. I will not. Right? Like that's like this
Yeah.
so simple.
Well, Paul says covetousness is idolatry, right? 3 words. Covetousness is idolatry. It's saying, I would prefer a different God than the one that gave me this world. the one that gave him that thing rather than me. And so much of it.
Work that out. Work that out. Covetousness is idolatry. Covetousness is just saying no thank you.
Yeah, so rather than saying, hey, Iris, look what I got, I'm grateful for it, you say, if I were God, I would have given me something different. Or I would prefer a God that gave me something different, right? So it's where gratefulness is, gratefulness is worship. This is why in the beginning of Romans says they were ungrateful and turned to idols, right? That the ungratefulness is what turns them to idols, because that covetousness is at its root, it's idolatry. It's desiring a different God than the actual God that created us.
That
So
messes up everything.
everything.
That messes up everything. Wow. Okay, I'm sorry. I just had to. My head's going. Yeah, I need to write on that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
So a helpful, I don't, you you hear, so Socrates, I mean, Plato writing the character of Socrates, he talks about how Socrates uh, went to, or Socrates, he's interacting with the phrase "know thyself," which was carved into um, the Apollos, um, one of the temples of Apollos, and he says, "Well, what does it mean to know thyself?" Right? That's what philosophy is about. Well, the conclusion that Plato comes to is that know thyself means understanding um, who you are and your place in society, and when you can gratefully embrace that, then you will find you'll find satisfaction, and it'll go better for you. And then the question is, can people really do that? He says, I don't know, I'm not sure if it's even possible. Right? Well, that understanding of know yourself, as when I know myself, what that means is I know my place in society and I embrace it joyfully, right? That I know my place in the community and I embrace it joyfully. That understanding of self-knowledge is something that well, when you look at now, when somebody says, well, know thyself um, is a virtue, or it's what we're after, what they generally mean is refuse your limitations, know yourself apart from all expectations that society places on you, right? Know your true self, and then refuse all of the limitations that society wants to put on you, right? That is a shift that began happening in the Enlightenment. Guys like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, you begin getting this move away from this move towards that radical individualism, where a person is a self-creative force, right? That their decisions, their mindset, all of that is they become a self-creative force, rather than accepting from anyone else their nature. They have to create their own nature. And that is at root, that's just Pelagianism, right? That's a revival of a Pelagian mindset. We've seen that heresy before, but we have a hard time recognizing it because for a long time it was on the edges and now it's at the center.
I might be pushing this to the point it breaks down, but could you figure out how that? Do you know how that works itself out in kind of free market exercise? How does that begin to translate? I know I'm putting you on the spot because I don't know how much you've thought about that, but I know it always does. I'm just wondering.
I think of it, I think of it this way, right? That in a truly free market, the person who is successful generally in a proverbial way, I'm not in an Ecclesiastes way, but in general, in a proverbial way, the person that's successful is the one that's best at adding value to his neighbor's life, right?
Keep going. I'm listening.
Yeah. So in a free market context, the one who is best at identifying their neighbor's needs and desires and meeting them is the one who will be successful in that free market setting. But in a collectivist setting, the one who is successful is the one that's best at getting hold of and manipulating the levers of power. And when individuals are dislodged from society, right? When they have that breakdown of society, where society is held in place by force and not held in place by people that are embracing their place in society. the levers of power become more and more coercive. And so in a collectivist setting, what Pelagianism leads to is fascism. Yeah, is I'm financially successful because I have successfully manipulated power,
Right.
rather than I'm financially successful because I've added a lot of value to people's lives, and so they have exchanged value in the form of money with me.
So cancel culture is a direct result in one way of Pelagianism, because they're trying to use a form of power in order to.
Yeah, I mean, I think
because go ahead.
So yeah, social cancel culture, because I think there's always cancellation in a society is always a thing, but what you want is it connected to the justice system.
Well,
right?
hold on. I'll let you attack this for a second. It's one thing to say your product doesn't work for me anymore, and so because that product isn't good for me or valuable for me, I reject it. Right? It's a whole nother thing to say, and this is still in free market. It's a whole nother thing to say, like, your product is absolutely more superior than everybody else's. I love your product, but you're not doing it how I want you to do, and I'm going to force you to do it how I want you to do. And so I'm going to use this form of power to try and get you to do that.
Right. And that's what I mean is cancel culture as a social force is different than, this person is breaking the law, and so they are receiving the justice of the law, right? People have always been canceled from society,
Sure.
but you want it attached to justice rather than attached to the coercive social powers, right? So
fair enough.
If you think of the 50s or the 60s, somebody gets caught having an affair, and they are and the divorce comes and ruins their life, right? They are often pushed out of social circles because now they're no longer a trustworthy person.
They broke contract.
Right. You say, well, if you can't keep the most basic contract in your life, then I'm not doing business with you. Right.
Well, I can easily extrapolate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem, I think, is not that we have, because we've never had what you would think of as a pure exchange culture or a pure exchange economy. It's always a personal economy. What's different is now it's been decoupled from reality. So cancel culture is when you decouple social the social benefit and social
I see.
Social benefit,
the market.
Right. Yeah. So because being a trustworthy person has always had a positive social benefit, but you've and being an untrustworthy person, when society's doing well, people like that, people that act that way get pushed to the edges. So there's always been edges of society that you can get pushed out of.
Yeah, that's inescapable.
But what cancel culture does is it decouples it from the personal relationships, personal goodness, and it attaches it to propaganda and political power. Right. So the existence of being able to get canceled is not something that is necessarily a problem. Being able to get canceled for political coercive means to be able to control a population, to get them to act in accord with the restructuring of the power, the power systems in society. That's the problem with cancel culture.
So then when you say know thyself, you just explain that the difference between that and love your neighbor as yourself, because you got those two things, and you have to have a good understanding of the self in order to be able to love your neighbor. But this self is defined differently.
Right. So this is why the opening of the institutes is deeply Augustinian, where when Calvin says the two most important things are to know God and to know yourself. You
Yeah.
can't know God without knowing yourself, and you can't know yourself without knowing God. And then to understand that self knowledge is a communal knowledge. You don't know yourself directly by pulling off into a corner and digging into your own selfhood, right? We don't have access to knowledge of ourself except by means of community. We can only see ourselves through the eyes of our neighbor.
Okay,
Right?
hold
So
on,
that,
wait. I got to pause right there because you're hitting on something. Please don't forget what you're going to say. As
okay,
soon as you said that, the first thing that popped in my head was I see so many people like, I need to go have some me time. And what they
right,
mean by that is completely decoupling themselves from the rest of everybody else to go look inside of themselves to enjoy me so much. Right.
right,
But
and usually what that means is I'm being a bad, and it doesn't always mean this, but it often means I'm being a bad person to other people. And so I feel terrible. If I go off by myself, I no longer have that guilt and shame from the people that I've mistreated. And so I can rest from my guilt and shame rather than deal with my guilt and shame. Now that doesn't,
you're going to
it
get
doesn't
emails on that.
always, it doesn't always mean that because, you see Jesus doesn't go off to be alone. Jesus goes off to be with his Father, right? So he goes and his Father, the who stands over him and says, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." His identity is wrapped up in the love that God has for him, right? And so there is a retreat to be with God that resets our identity in the love and mercy and grace of our Father. That's good. There's a retreat. So then when you go back and you realize that the guilt and the shame that cause our fear and our anxiety, which is the experience of being dislodged from self-knowledge, in the traditional sense, the knowledge of my place, knowledge of who I am, knowledge that anxiety is the experience of being dislodged from a true self-knowledge in terms of my place in society, my place in relationship to God, my place in my family and my nation and my church, all of those things. Well, there's a way to that where we retreat to our relationship with the Father and are reminded of our true identity in his love for us, so that when we go back, that the shame and the guilt cease to have the dislodging effect on us anymore, because we've replanted our identity in the love of God for us. We've replanted our identity in our citizenship in the kingdom of light. We've replanted our identity in our adoption into the family of God, right? So
Let's call it Lord's Day, though. Don't we do that every week?
It is, yeah. So I think that's one of the central things that the Lord's Supper does for us, right? We eat and drink the promises of God, right? We renew the forgiveness of our sins. We are the love of God is redeclared over us, right? The benediction at the end of the service is the same sort of thing. The confession of sin and the declaration of forgiveness. They all have that same sort of purpose. So that, but when know yourself means know myself out of relationship, right? Know myself directly, then me time becomes escape from my guilt and my shame. That's real, right? My objective guilt and shame, so that I can rest in myself and found my selfhood upon myself. Now, obviously that hasn't been working, because you look at the breakdown of civilization, almost all of it comes out of the nihilistic metaphysic and the self-founded the self as the foundation of reality. That's why our civilization's falling apart.
Do you think in this? whatever you, I don't care who you are, what side of this you're on, when you see Trump's coalition and you see this new movement, there is genuine excitement that whatever direction that has been going is coming to an end. And all the people on one side of this know this. They're it's like roaches. It's like somebody turned on the light and everybody, all these people are scurrying around trying to figure out how to hide because they know sanitation is coming because the lights popped on, and so there is this point where everybody's happy about this. The thing that nobody knows yet what we're going to be cleaning with, but we're just happy we're going to be cleaning, right? And
Right.
so I'm excited about this. But as we're in this process, and it seems like we have the ear in a lot of ways, people who I know are getting picked to be a part of this administration.
Right.
Um, and it's really exciting. What are some things that, the whole reason I did this writing challenge for 30 days was I wanted to be communicating as best I could the glory and the beauty of common things that we've forgotten about so that we can have an inculcation with this new group of people that are coming in who do want a sanitized environment, who do want a clean environment, don't want the roaches anymore, but they don't know necessarily how to get rid of roaches, but they're
Right.
happy, but they're willing to smash them. But you got to have something more than that. You got to have something. And I want to have this point of inculcation for people who I think have a Pelagius practice, but desire an Augustinian environment.
Right.
Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is Elon Musk saying, "Okay, I'm not a Christian, but I am a cultural Christian."
Right.
Right? That's
Exactly.
exactly what he's communicating. Where he says, "Okay, I don't believe it, but man, does it create better civilizations."
Yes, and I think that's a great
Yes.
opportunity for us. Some people are over here crying like, "Oh my goodness, we're going to go to the far side now. The pendulum swinging too far." I'm like, if you're going to be successful, you're going to swing the pendulum one way or the other, right? Like you can't help that. And I'm happy that it's swinging this way, and I'm not trying to stop it from swinging. I'm just wanting to land in the right spot, right? Like while it's
Yeah.
swinging this direct, and instead of complaining about or being disappointed about the success of it, or I'm just like, how do we begin the inculcation process so while it's swinging the right way, we're able to reach these people and say, oh, this is what Christianity is. This is what I
Right.
want. This is the kind of thing I think is going to help flourishing. I want it to be beautiful. And I don't see a point yet for us to inculcate those people. I think that we have their attention,
Yeah.
but and so I'm thinking of like entry points that we need to be thinking about, talking about, engaging with, so that our conversation is so beautiful that they want to latch on to that.
Yeah. Well, so I have a friend who he's Orthodox, been Orthodox for a long time, and his family goes to a Orthodox church, and he said, it's monthly. You've got young dudes, sometimes by themselves, sometimes a couple of them that just walk in to a Sunday service, never been to church before, and so they somebody in the manosphere said, "Hey, I'm Orthodox," and they said, "Oh, what's that?" Looked it up online and decided to visit. And he said the grandmas in the church are prepped and ready to grab them. They grab them, they sit with them, because what's the thing that they don't have? Well, they're dislodged from their families, they're dislodged from their identity, they're dislodged from their history, and they need grandma, right? They need a grandma, they need a grandpa, and the church can provide that. And I think that
Oh wow, our widows and our older men are about to get really busy.
really busy, right? There's such a huge opportunity. I remember this in the 90s, during the era of kind of the when there was the breakout of all the gang warfare. Anymore, I don't know how much of it was real and how much of it was just the media.
Right,
Now I think about
right.
all those things and think, were they lying to me all the way back then?
Yes.
But I remember watching this interview with this pastor who was talking about the youth program that their church had, which was a couple of old guys in their 70s who walked around the neighborhood a couple of times a week, introduced themselves to the young men, and invited them to come to their Bible study. And they had all these teenage boys that they had just claimed as their grandchildren from the neighborhood that didn't have dads. And the guy was saying, like, we have this incredible youth program, and here's our youth pastor. He's 70 years old, and he just looked around the neighborhood and said, "Oh, they don't have dads. I could do that.
Yeah.
Mine, yeah." And so made himself available, and walked the neighborhood and kind of claimed all these fatherless children as his own, and was transforming the neighborhood, right? So you see, I mean, I think that kind of mindset that says they're floating along. How do we get the nets out? How do we, and I don't think it's, we don't think we need to have just an awesome, online presence. I don't think I think it's, we need to just be in our communities.
Boots on the ground. One of the things that hindered, it's hit me probably in the last 5 years that I'm getting to be one of the older guys now.
Yeah.
Like it didn't, and no one told me. I keep waiting for I'm gonna tell you something. If you have sons, make sure you have markers for when they've reached certain areas in their life. Like it's so important for a father to tell his son, "You're a man now. This is it. You've hit that mark." And so there's a lot of things you have to put away. I've been preparing you for this moment. So you prepare them to be able to hand them a baton, to certain batons at different points in their life, and not having that baton handed was really hard for me to know when those markers of like, oh, I'm doing man stuff. I'm a man. I've hit the, okay. How does a man deal with this now? And not knowing, not having a father, you feel very inefficient to be able to take on those responsibilities well. And it's been one of those things over the last 5 years, I realized like I've kind of moved into that position unintentionally. There's younger guys who are like in their 20s that are half my age now. I'm like, oh, I'm that guy. Right. I got to talk to this young guy. And then I realized that I feel so woefully inefficient to be able to bring them along because I'm still trying to get this thing myself together. And so I'm like, I'll let somebody else who has it together be able to get these guys. And it's like, no, you're actually the guy. Like,
you're the guy.
You don't get to say, oh, I wish I had it together anymore. No, you better get it together right now at this very moment because you're the guy. I was in Walmart having that moment and was like, wait a second. He sees me as an older, wiser dude. He's so wrong, but I don't have a choice. I better be him. I got to be him right now. And I sat there in Walmart and talked to this young cat for like 20 minutes. And I realized like the things that I don't feel like I know very well, I know a lot better than he does. And I have to take what I know and start communicating to him. And I'm talking to young guys about raising kids. And I forgot when I was 23, how much I needed the stuff that I know now that I've learned from raising in the process of raising 7, that he's got babies. And I'm like, oh, snap. I know a lot here from talking to him that he doesn't even know yet, but I wouldn't have known how much I know that I've had to learn that God has been gracious to me about that I need to be passing down. And so now I'm starting to intentionally look for those opportunities, right? And figure out how to come alongside some of those younger men because I'm like, oh, I do have more than what I thought,
Yeah. Well, and one of the things too is you don't actually have to know everything. You just communicate. What does it look like to trust the Lord in these situations when you're in over your head because you got kids all of a sudden? You're like, I don't know how to do that. It's like, yep, that is what God does. He gives us kids, and we're woefully unprepared. And then he says, trust me, they're mine. I will be a God to them. Trust me for them. Trust me with them. And
that's simply said, but that is so key. Like, What is Faith by J. Gresham Machen is the book to have built into your, you should know it, because I'm realizing more and more that that's the key. I've had this saying now, like, and it should be just how I live. It's like, Lord, it's on you. Like I'm just, it's on you, Jesus. I'm just gonna trust you and do what you said do. But bottom line is, if this is gonna work, it's on you. Like you got to fix this one. You got to do this, and I'm gonna repent and do everything I'm supposed to. But I really am putting this all in your hands, and you got to make it work because I can't make it work. And it's been the successes in my family that's made me realize that that's on God. Like that's him. I didn't do that. That's not me. If I did that, it'd be an absolute mess. But it's me trusting him, and he does it. And it's so hard to actually believe that. Like he tells you to do it. You say okay, and then he does it, and you're surprised every time. Like, why would you be surprised? But
Right.
because you don't see past where you're at. You're like, okay, you tell me that this right here, this Red Sea is gonna open up. It's on you if it don't. I just want you to know, like, that. But I'm just gonna do everything you said. I'm gonna speak to it. All right. Oh wow, look at that. I'm surprised. And it's always like, why are you surprised?
Why are you surprised? Yeah, I was thinking about the same thing in terms of the oil that Elijah's oil that keeps replenishing itself, and how every time I go back, I'm surprised it's there again. Like, oh my gosh, it happened again. For some reason, I thought last time would be the last time. I don't know.
And it was
like just my faith is so quick to dissipate in the heat of the day.
Because it's a. Go ahead.
But because I think it's because I so quickly forget who God is, and his love and care and power and glory and all of those things.
That's what I'm trying to spend the time writing about, is observing some of those basic things so I don't forget. Like he has no problem raising the sun again every morning. Every morning he does it, right? Every morning he does it. And it's over. And just to speak to your last point, God always raises us from faith to faith. So he gives you enough faith to believe for the next thing, and then the next thing. And then you're like, okay, I've got it figured out. But then the challenge is so big for this next thing. And you're like, ooh, it's like, but hold on. He gave you faith here for this. He gave you faith there for that. Why wouldn't he give you faith for this next thing? Why wouldn't he give you faith for the thing after that? And I've realized that I don't have the kind of Caleb faith where it says, look at that mountain over there. Let's go see if God won't give that one to us. And that's what
Right.
I'm trying to get my faith to. It's like, that's too insurmountable. I wonder if God won't give it to us, right? Like that's the kind of thing. And I hear my charismatic people thinking like that. My charismatics are like, they'll go mess up some stuff real quick thinking like that. And my reformed people were like, well, we got faith for what happened over here and we're good.
Right.
And it's like, no.
We've got all this faith for what happened in the 16th and 17th centuries. We never have to open it again. It already happened.
Exactly. And which in one sense, you should look at the Trump thing and be like, God got this.
Right.
Like, yeah, of course he does. And having faith for the next thing.
And I think just because the accusation that I keep seeing is that people that said, all right, Trump got elected, let's go. People saying, oh, so you trust in Trump now. That's idolatry, right? Seeing that, I've seen that a whole bunch of times. And it is, but the reason it's effective, or the reason it works, is because I actually do know how quickly I covet.
That's true.
True. So
I've seen it.
I've seen it. Yeah. I think, oh wait, am I doing that? Right. And then being able to stop and say, oh no, actually I'm not in this situation. Or if it turns out to be true, go, oh, I am. Go, oh, Father in heaven, forgive me for that. And then you're forgiven. And you move on, right? Like you don't have to be paralyzed by the fear of guilt, even if it turns out to be right. And but I do think now we have an opportunity that I think we need to really dig into our long game in a way that we haven't, because we had this. It would have looked different to dig into the long game had we had different results in the election.
Right. But
now we know where we are and we have an opportunity. I don't know if people realize the appointment to what's the guy's name that was a Fox News consultant?
Pete Hegseth.
Pete Hegseth. He has a best-selling book about classical
Yeah,
education
that's right, with David Goodwin.
with David Goodwin, right? I don't think people realize the boon to classical education that's coming. And if we're not prepped and ready and starting to work on starting schools, then we're not going to be able to catch all the salmon that are coming upstream, right?
We should rule
But
education.
we really should. But it's a long game. It's hard work. It's a long game. You got to think multi-generationally. You've got to think in terms of investing in institutions that will where the investment is continually available for next generations. Those sorts of things. That's hard, and it's inglorious, right? It is not flashy to start thinking, I got to make sure my children are well educated. I want to set them up in such a way that they can they can educate my grandchildren even better. How can I do this? And whether that's through homeschooling with solid communities, whether it's starting schools, whether it's co-ops, whatever it is, that long game, we have an opportunity that we haven't had in a really long time to establish that long game well.
I do have to say, though,
to not lose our children. Right, we got to just not lose our children.
And we have opportunity to gain a lot more. This was something that has been going on for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so this moment is a culmination of Christians working really hard in this area for 40 years so that someone like a Hegseth gets there, and the attention he gets shines a huge light on a work that's been developing that a lot of people do not know about. Right? A lot of people do not know about, and they're about to find out.
This is the way God works too, because what God didn't do was get hold of the guy that starts classical Christian education and put him in the cabinet. Right. He grabs a guy who's converted late in life, who looks at his kids and says, I want a good Christian education for my kids, sees classical education, is new to it, excited about it. I should write a book about this. This is so great. And then puts him in the cabinet and makes sure that the glory can only go to God.
That's right.
This is not a plow plant, harvest, plow plant, harvest, plow plant, we're in charge type of thing.
Right.
This is God saying, hey, I don't want you to forget that this is me that is blessing you, that I've been blessing you all along, that I've been I've been restoring education to my people's children for years, and I'm expanding it now, but it's me that's doing it, and so there's no way to glorify anyone but God for that, because you can't that wasn't good strategy.
No,
put it that way. But it's exciting. I mean, as somebody that just loves classical education so much, I was stunned. I'm excited by the moment that God has put us in.